So like Epi mentioned, my name is Alkarim Nasser. I came all the way from Toronto, and I've been a big fan of what Epi's been working on for the last, I guess, a little bit over a year now. And you know, we're not actively working in the crowdfunding or crowdsourcing space, but we do work in the innovation space. And one of the tools that we have in our toolbox is crowdfunding and crowdsourcing. In the innovation space, we work with major brands, banks, retailers to see, you know, and find ways they can leverage emerging technology to do interesting things, to market, to manage their back office, to grow their market size. But with all these tools and this team of engineers, we've always been interested in how we can kind of give back to the community. So today we're going to talk about a little bit of how we've been able to manage to build a framework, a crowdsourced framework for not-for-profits. So some of the stuff we've done in the past, you know, on the business side, is create crowdsourcing campaigns where we can tap into the communities to build, you know, large event databases. So this is actually a screenshot from a website by CBC, one of the national broadcasters in Canada, where they have something every year called Sports Day. And this particular Sports Day, we actually reached out to the community and said, hey, anyone interested in sports that want to celebrate sports? Obviously, Canada is a big sports hub for hockey and basketball and curling. So we reached out to the community and said, hey, why don't we throw these independent events all over the world where everyone can participate in their own way in Sports Day. And then we've done some other really fun stuff. We created a website about 2 years ago where we created a service where anyone on Twitter can register for this website. And there's really two streams. So one stream can go to the website and ask for someone to draw an avatar for them, and the other stream went on the website and actually drew avatars. So you literally had thousands of people interacting with each other, meeting each other via this platform and fulfilling this avatar service. And I think all of these types of services and all of these types of platforms we've been hearing about is really possible by the times we live in. Just going back, we've been through 5 major revolutions in the last 240 years. You know, the first one, obviously, the Industrial Revolution, where we built manufacturing, where we built factories. The second being transportation, where we began to connect the world a little bit. We built the railroads and started to really kind of globalize the world in a smaller way. Electricity, obviously bringing scale. During this revolution of electricity and steel, we built the ships that transported these goods across the world. In mass production, which was the one right before the one we're in now, we created sort of automobiles, we created brands, advertising was born in this revolution. And today we're celebrating sort of the information age. And I think the great thing about the information age is that this was the only revolution where we weren't separating the upper class from the lower class, we're actually bringing it together. And within this revolution, we've introduced almost 1 billion people into this middle class. And I think this is really sort of what has helped us create a crowdsourcing economy. You know, but with like every revolution, I think there's phases we need to consider. And in this particular evolution, we feel like we're only halfway there. So Carlota Perez, an academic, actually went and studied each one of these revolutions, and she realized something pretty insightful, that every revolution lasted only about 40 years. And they went through 2 stages. The first stage being installation. And that's where you have venture capital really carrying you know, the opportunity. They're the ones that have the vision. They're the ones financing the future. And at this stage, it's really about investing as much money as possible into creating the infrastructure that can eventually be used by many and kind of create that scale. Towards the end of the installation phase, you actually go through a little bit of a downturn. So the installation phase is invest, invest, invest. And then investors are all of a sudden starting to fear whether this was the right investment. So you can imagine when you're building the railroads, for 20 years they started building these railroads, but you don't get the immediate ROI from building the railroads while you're building them. You get it in the following 20 years. So generally what happens towards the end of installation is a bit of a frenzy. And we all remember the frenzy that happened about a little over 10 years ago, which was the dot-com crash. It's not like when the dot-com crashed, everyone said, oh, you know what, this internet thing, it wasn't a great idea. And it didn't just go away. In fact, it was now there, it was available to everyone, and we moved into the deployment stage where it was up to everyone to figure out how they can implement this technology, how it can change the world, how it can change every business. And I think as far as crowdsourcing goes, it really is a function of this deployment stage. This infrastructure was set up, we created scale, we connected the world, and now we're trying to find ways that we can use this technology to disrupt every industry. We started off with the technology industry, and I think now in this deployment stage, we're looking at how can we disrupt every other industry, whether it be health, education, resources, and particularly not, as far as this conversation is concerned, not for profit. The interesting thing about revolutions and these revolutions is that in every revolution, you have to resolve all the problems of the previous revolution. So you have to understand sort of what it was that happened, what innovations happened in the previous revolution, and you have to rethink it with the tools that are available to us. A good example of sort of what we're seeing in the deployment stage of this particular information age revolution is this insurgence of the participation economy. So a good story to really show sort of the power of this participation economy goes back to sort of a village in Africa that was completely destroyed by a natural disaster. So this town was destroyed, and it's not like they have a Home Depot or a local hardware store where they can just go and buy the tools to rebuild the city. Instead, they put up a board right in the middle of the village, and on that board they asked everyone to write what tools that they have access to. And everyone went onto that board and said, I have a hammer, or I have a saw, or I have an axe. And all of a sudden you have essentially this crowdsourced platform, which is sort of a resource allocation tool for people to find the tools that they need. Because it's silly to think that we need to have a hammer in every single household. Not everyone's going to use their hammer at the exact same time. And this is sort of where the birth of this crowdsourcing or participation economy really came from. And this is disrupting industries everywhere. So throughout this conference, we've heard people talk about Uber disrupting transportation, Airbnb. Again, if you're not going to be using your home, someone else could be using it. And the list goes on. Your boat, your dog, your mailbox, your watershed, your cottage, everything can be shared. And I think that's the most interesting thing about this generation or this evolution that we're going through. But how do we deploy these ideas into other areas, especially non-technology sectors? Because again, I think the focus has always been technology. Even a lot of these crowdfunding sites, they focus on helping people create more technology projects. But I think what we really need to be looking at is how we can impact all the other verticals that don't necessarily have the engineers and the minds to help innovate and disrupt. And we need people to really take those horns. So there's over 2 million charities worldwide. In Canada, we have about 100,000. And these charities are, pretty much equivalent to the bike. They don't have the horsepower, they don't have the scalability, they don't have the efficiency, and they don't have the know-how to create incredible technology that's going to innovate what they're trying to do. But with that technology, they can spend more time focusing on the actual goal or the opportunity they're going after, opposed to the administration, opposed to spending marketing dollars to get awareness. They can focus on actually making that difference. So we're seeing this rise of these not-for-profit crowdsourcing platforms. OpenIDEO is an incredible platform where essentially anyone can go on and say, like, this is a cause that I'm working for, and you can enlist, help, funding, support for that particular cause. Kiva, you can it's a micro-lending platform where you can start to lend your dollars to a lot of these charitable initiatives. And web charting is an interesting platform where you can donate your services. So it's actually targeted to internet marketers and internet professions, where you can just donate, whether it's a design or a website or whatever that expertise you have, to a particular cause. And web charity is run by UNICEF. But it wasn't until I got a phone call from Elmer Soto, actually the head of growth of Facebook here in Singapore. And he said, you know what, AK, we have to find a way that we can use these resources that we collectively have to make a difference in the not-for-profit sector. And obviously Elmer's focused on Facebook. We're running and growing bNotions. But there's something we can do with other spare cycles or some of the tools we've used to grow our businesses to impact these not-for-profits. So we started thinking about that. One of the ways we exercise innovation at bNotions is we are big advocates of this concept of hackathons. Hackathons is where sort of a lot of innovations are born. Some of these, the biggest technology companies that we look up to were born out of hackathons, whether it be Startup Weekend or Angel Hack. Very recently, we actually worked with NASA to run Space Apps, which is a hackathon focused on aerospace innovation. Why can't we apply this model to not-for-profits? And that's where this concept of Hack for a Cause was born. We looked at the same toolbox of agile and lean methodologies and bringing together a bunch of enthusiastic, innovative startup people into a room to innovate. But we needed to make sure that it wasn't just a waste of effort. We needed to make sure that we were focused on something very specific, that we can make the most out of this hackathon. So we created a list of rules. The first rule was tap into the startup community. Take the people that are used to innovating on a daily basis, that are building great businesses, and leverage them. The great part about sort of this most recent revolution is we've connected the world and we've given people a lot more scale to accomplish things that are intrinsically very valuable to them. So this is an economy of sharing. It's an economy of generosity. It's an economy of helping other people. And these are traits and values that are actually quite prevalent within the technology community. So let's tap into this group of people. The second rule was only one night. We didn't want to make this an extended whole weekend or an extended week. We wanted people to be focused. For 12 hours, what can you accomplish? We tapped into some of the leaders in the community. So who are the people that have the most access to engineers, to designers, to the types of tools and resources that we need to pull together a hackathon that we can focus on these not-for-profits? The next rule is pick a single cause. So the idea of, okay, well, maybe we can have 100 people come together and they can all do something different. We thought that it would be more valuable to actually choose one charity. And it's not just about choosing one charity, it's choosing the right charity. So one thing that we needed to make sure was that the charity that we chose was actually open to innovation. So we had to ask them a couple pretty tough questions. First one being, we need access to all your servers. You need to essentially hand over the keys to all the technology you've built to date. With that comes, obviously a lot of accountability and responsibility, but what we want to make sure is that everything that was built during this one night was actually going to ship and make an impact. And the train leaves the station. So this is an agile sort of philosophy where, if at the end of the night or an agile at the end of the sprint, you have to ship the product, no matter what state you're in. So you're constantly prioritizing, you're constantly reorganizing yourself, you're constantly, choosing one feature over another. You're kind of looking at how can we make sure that at the end of this night or at the end of the sprint that something will end up shipping that creates some value. So what we had was the charity come in, open up everything to us, give us full access to their technology stack. We invited their engineers to participate with us to give them that trust and that confidence that these 100 engineers that we pulled together are not going to destroy their company but actually make an impact. And we had that charity think really hard about what it is that they would like from us. So this particular charity that we focused on was Free the Children. So we asked them what their core challenges were. They had challenges that were related to their CRM. So they had a few different systems but that didn't really talk to each other. They had another challenge around awareness. So they needed to make sure that they weren't just spending millions of dollars getting awareness out there, but they can tap into social and they tap into the virality of these social communities to create that awareness. So they came to us with a list of challenges, and we, as a group, separated ourselves into little teams and all picked one or two challenges. And over the course of the night, we created 12 projects, which shipped that next morning. And just have a little video to show you about what went down that night. So over the course of 12 hours, we actually created 12 projects. 12 projects that completely changed the way that this not-for-profit operated. Created a mobile app that helped engage the whole community. So everyone that was a fan of the Facebook page, we created this mobile app where they can see all the events that are happening in their community and they can start getting involved. We created another app that connected all the CRMs used by this particular not-for-profit. We created Facebook widgets on their website so people can share, like, and quickly engage on Facebook with this particular charity. And within 2 months of launching all these projects, this charity hit 1 million likes on Facebook. And we ended up getting a mass distribution. And they've used these tools to now achieve almost 3 million likes on Facebook. But just pulling together one hackathon and one set of engineers over the course of the night isn't going to change the world, right? It's really a one-off, and we only really helped one charity. But what we can do to change the world is create a framework where other people can inherit this thinking, can take the steps we took to bring this crowd together, to choose the right charity, to make sure they're focusing on the right problem. And we created a framework on a website called hackforacause.com, where we basically gave the world sort of the same process that we used. And with this framework, we've seen teams in Sydney take the framework and implement the same process and run their own Hack for a Cause. We've had a team in Buenos Aires, again, take the framework and implement their own Hack for a Cause. And we've seen student organizations throughout Canada and university organizations take this and build it right into their extracurricular activities. So what I'd love to see is, let's see what Singapore can do with this framework. What we're working on is actually creating a very scalable version of this. So essentially a platform where a not-for-profit can go onto a website, upload all their challenges, tap into the larger engineering community, and don't even have to wait for a single night to execute on this, but execute on this whenever they want. A charity can just go in and essentially crowdsource any of their engineering challenges and quickly solve a lot of the problems that they don't have the resources and financing to solve. Thank you.